I'm Chris from Airwindows, and hey, you can do this. But a lot more than just that, because this is Airwindows EverySlew. Now, you might not know what that means yet, but you're about to find out. Voila. Here is EverySlew. What you're hearing is a jam that I did last Thursday where it kind of didn't really work out, but I have a loud hi-hat on there and a bunch of ugly noises, so I thought it might be fun to just use that to demonstrate the plugin. So here's our plugin. We've got slew, depth, halo, and inverse wet. Slew is what you would expect. We're used to that. I've been putting a slew control on the last three plugins. Well, the last two plugins. The first one was the original slew. And what you're hearing is literally the original slew, because depth is the feature that I've added to GoldenSlew and PlatinumSlew. Halo is part of what makes PlatinumSlew do what it does. And inv wet, well, that's a little new and special. So what do we have here? Let's run over it fairly quickly, because otherwise this is going to be a really long video. Here we have regular slew. If we add depth, it turns into GoldenSlew. But if you're not using all of the stages of GoldenSlew, because they can be somewhat exaggerated, you can dial in less of it. The way it works is depth is essentially the number of stages divided by 10. So one stage is going to be depth 0, and I believe getting to let's find out. I'll try. In theory, we should go to 0.1, and it'll sound slightly different, and so on. You can dial in a different tone using that. I'm going to be using this to set up the console versions that I still need to do. It is going to be a matter of dialing in as much of that behavior as I need to get the sound that I want. Now here's something that's a little different. Halo. There's a little bit of this halo control in PlatinumSlew. It's what gives it that sort of special coloration, and it's what keeps it from getting stuck. If you have too high of a slew setting, it won't get subsonic frequencies stuck and unable to slew any further. Here's what it sounds like on one stage all by itself. You can hear that it kicks in real hard. So let's do a much lesser slew setting. It turns into basically 9-inch nails or something. But the amount that we use in something like PlatinumSlew is much smaller. So just enough to give the sound of the thing. And of course, PlatinumSlew defaults to all of the depth, so this gives us PlatinumSlew. Most effectively used with a relatively small amount of that effect, but there's more. If we don't use full wet. And this is something that has not been part of any of the previous Slew plugins. Slightly less depth. Halo. And then an inv wet control. The middle is dry. So you can add however much you want of this horrifying sound, but inv means inverse. Inv means subtract everything but what's being taken out in the slew. So what you hear with the halo is a really gruesome sound here. But if we didn't have halo, all of a sudden we have that effect where you hear how much it's doing. Here's almost no slew. Here's what it hits first. And here it is, hitting some of that synthesizer sound. When it kicks in and starts getting all filtery, it jumps out. We hear it. And this is it in normal use. Supposing we went and put in a lot of depth. So that sounds different, but how different really is it? Well, with inverse, we can hear it's having a more profound effect. And we can dial back the slew again. And there's what it's doing. And with no depth, we're getting one level of slew clipping. With full depth, we're getting a lot more. But then when we start including halo, things get a little weirder. It starts kicking in a lot harder, so we can pull slew back again. And now we have something going on where we can almost dial in the most unnatural and unpleasant parts of this sound, where that synthesizer is just getting kind of gnarly and the lows are kicking in and it's doing a variety of things. What that sounds like at full wet has its own thing going on. Raw and the effect. And this is the inverse. This is what's being taken out. And of course we can use that on purpose. And now, this is what it's taking out. Because of course if you have inverse and wet, and you've got the whole thing slewed to within an inch of its life, the inverse will be what's left over. This is all that our wet is anymore. Or if we take the halo out, we can use slew clipping to do this with it. Maybe just a tiny bit of halo. To make it more gnarly. Then if we do inverse, we're taking out this weird gnarly subsonic rumble. A pretty weird way to do a high pass, if you ask me. And of course, since it is an inverse wet slider, middle is dry. Full wet is, of course, what the output of the control is. And you can fade in some of the dry, or apply as much of that effect as you want. There you have it. So my strange music from Thursday had a kind of a use, maybe? I'm going to try to make more reasonable music, but I'm going to keep doing that kind of thing. If I spend a day being like, this music is so bad it should be punished, well, being publicly watched doing it is probably punishment enough. And I do hope to continue doing other stuff, but one thing that happens is you also get plugins out of all of this. And EverySlew is something that I made specifically for the purpose of going in and emulating analog console behaviors. Now, I'm not going to be doing that necessarily with the inverse 9-inch nail style industrial noise creator functionality, although it will be a handy way of checking to see what I'm taking out. People do tend to like that. They tend to like hearing the delta of what the effect is, and that's a nice thing to add to it. But the purpose of that plugin is very much to be able to dial in the sort of top-end restraint that you got off of classic records, because you got lots of nice detail and so on, but working in digital, you get sort of ultimate detail and accuracy beyond even what the physical world will give you. If you took the horrible synthesizer and some hi-hats and things like that, and you put them in a room 20 feet away, you wouldn't get that. That's not realistic. What you hear out of a digital mix isn't like the real world. And that's what the analog consoles and things had going on, is increasingly people started recording all of the instruments separately to tracks, and they were able to do these very creative things with them. But using big analog consoles and mixing to tape and all of that kind of stuff put you in a situation where the entire recording chain did not give you accuracy, but it gave you an imaginary world that had some things in common with the real world. And accuracy does not sound like sounds mixing in the real world in air. It just doesn't. So I got a lot of work to do with all this kind of thing. There's a number of things I'm going to be bringing out. For instance, you'll be seeing pretty soon a new version of console, which was some of my experimentation of where I was going following up console 0. And furthermore, it is being released. It's a version of Purist Console. It'll be Purist Console 3. It's another simplified form of the math involved in doing the sine and arcsine behavior that I use for this. But unlike a bunch of ones I've been putting out, the newest version of Purist Console, like the first Purist Console, does not have ultrasonic filtering or anything in there. It's designed to be a nice, efficient way to get pretty close to the sine-based processing in the original Purist Console for people who like doing oversampling. I'm giving you a version of Airwindows Console, a very pure and high-performance version of Airwindows Console that you can oversample to the moon if you want. Because some people dig that kind of thing. The kinds of sounds that they like, they can be relatively insensitive, I think, to bit depth destruction and so on. You can go down to 16-bit or whatever. They don't hear a difference, but they hear aliasing super easy. So I'm coming out with a version of Airwindows Console that is friendly, and maybe I'll try to demonstrate it by learning what the oversampling thing is in Reaper and using that. But you should be able to have that to fool with as well if you want. And it also means I get to make another plugin, which is also coming, Every Console. By which I mean a console plugin that is all of them in one. And when I say all of them, I mean the original Console 4. I'm leaving out some things. It's the guts, the underlying algorithm of Airwindows Console, which turns out that's like Console 0 through 4, well, not Console 1 through 4, which is its own thing, and then Console 6, and then Console 7, which is different from any of the other ones, then the sine function that I use while doing lots of other things in Console 8, then Console 0, and also a couple of variations on the technique that I used in Console 0, doing an approximation of a sine calculate. And all of them will be available in both channel and bus versions on the same plugin. And all of them run without any kind of filtering or anything like that, so that you can take that and do your oversampling on that if you want, but it will also be convenient for me to do coming up with ways of making the new versions of Airwindows Console that have letters and are designed to sound like real-world giant analog consoles, such as nobody gets to use anymore. Well, you get to have those sounds again. I'm bringing them back. And it should be kind of fun. I don't know how long it's going to take. I do have to also do the new versions of reverbs with the things I've learned off of the Bricasti and the reference audio that I have off of the Bricasti. I've done all my reference for Bricasti sounds, and it's a whole bunch of stuff to hear. And I'm in the process of checking out the different kinds of sounds that you get off of all of those different console versions in all possible combinations. Because there's the thing. I can make certain combinations of those things and then study them and go, that sounds an awful lot like Mackie 8 buses. And that gives me the tools that I need to do things like put out a giant old Mackie with, a Mackie cue and so on built into that, and the amount of preamp gain you have in those. So yeah, there's a lot to do, but that's kind of what I do. I mean, that's my job. I have a Patreon. Patreon keeps me doing all of these things, and I don't have to quit or stop because I can just buckle down and do it and know that I am able to stay where I am staying. By the way, what I had been talking about with issues with my internet, I am already pursuing a way of upgrading what I've got. Hopefully I'll be able to keep my same email and stuff like that, but it's looking as if for slightly less than what I'm currently paying for outdated copper that nobody wants to support anymore, I should be able to pay not even quite as much as I'm currently paying for the copper DSL and have 100 times the bandwidth. Once I do that, you're going to start seeing things happen on a much more regular basis, because it'll take me minutes rather than hours upon hours to upload all of these things. And that'll be exciting. That'll be a time of starting to work quicker and do things more often. And until then, I'll talk to you later. And I hope you like EverySlew. Be careful with it. You can still trap DC in it if you don't behave properly around it. But it's one of those Airwindows chainsaw plugins where you could do really horrible things with it. I expect nothing less. Have fun. And I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.